everybody. Welcome to Desert Island Picks, part of the Mojo Nation Play Creators Festival. So far, it's going quite well, Harrie. One part done. Today, we are joined by a man who has clocked up 15 years as a toy designer. It's Spin Master's Director of Innovation and Preliminary Design. I don't really know what that means. I'm going to find out. It's Harrie Sivanander. Harrie, hello, and how are you?
Hey. Good. How you doing, Deej? Good to see you.
I'm very well. Felt like we got a slight delay there. Are you well? What's keeping you busy?
I'm doing well. It's summer. In the middle of everyone's COVID, and I'm in Toronto right now. So we have the extremes of winter and summer. So everybody is just trying to have as much summer fun as we can. And it's been beautiful. Some beach time, a little bit of work here and there, but otherwise, just the outdoors and parks have been lovely.
Excellent. And I said there that your job description, I'd never heard, Director of Innovation and Preliminary Design. I've never heard that job description. Is that, what does it mean? What do you do?
Gosh, I mean, it's kind of funny. Yeah, I feel like for the last 4 years or so, I've kind of been making up titles around that Spin Master. But yeah, so I work in the Inventor Relations department. I've been in design, like I said, for over 10 years prior. And then I jumped on to kind of help out with the business of operations of Inventor Relations in the traditional sense, and then add a design side of things to the inventions that come in before we send them on to the brand teams. And so for a couple of years, honestly, it was a bit of a floater role. In training, Ben Dermer and David Winter at the time, they've done a great job of just kind of helping me out, trying to figure out the business side of things that I wasn't too invested into prior. And so over time, the teams have changed, and now I handle preliminary development on things that are coming in the door, rough invention ideas that have some magic to it, but we don't know exactly what to do with it. Yeah. We traditionally would be just sending that over to the design teams and letting them flesh it out with insight that we might have. But we're trying to get ahead of that, doing a favor to the inventors and the design teams. And so for my role, I look for the innovation in things that are coming in the door and then translate that into tangible business opportunities for the teams to sink their teeth into. And that might mean looking at costing, assembly, manufacturing, cost of goods, and most importantly, just some sort of branding structure that says, hey, this is something that can fit into a category within our business.
Got it. Yeah, that makes sense. So you're really the first, I was about to say aegis of defense, but that perhaps is a little bit unfair. You're the first person, you're the first layer of filtering to try and get something into shape.
Right. And then more than just the filtering is doing the work, doing the work that we know will be done later or needs to be done later on. And sometimes, the actual schedule of things gets twisted around. We start doing this and this and this. And at the end of the line, we realize that we haven't done this check on QA or costing or assembly, and it just goes out the window. And you can't blame anyone. Everyone's busy going 100 miles a minute. So my job is really to focus in and do the actual work to prove all this stuff out in feasibility and tell people we can do this with confidence.
Interesting. And I was very curious then, because when I read a little bit about, I was about to say, no point in me saying it, I'll ask you. I was interested to find your journey into the industry. So tell us how you got, for those people that don't know you, tell us how you got into the industry.
Sure. I studied industrial design in Montreal, where I'm from. And I got an internship at Mega Bloks in Montreal and immediately just fell in love with toys. Like most people in the world, I didn't realize this was a job. And you walk into Mega Bloks and there's just toys everywhere, like, most toy companies. And yeah, there's just play in the air. You can kind of feel it. And there's a lot of Excel sheets and meetings and all the other stuff that people do on day to day, but there is a lot of fun to be had in that environment. And so, yeah, I was very lucky to have that opportunity during school, and then that translated into a full-time job. And then I spent about 2 years in between kind of doing non-toy stuff just to give it a try, but toys just stayed in my blood. And then I got to Toronto, and Spin Master gave a lot of opportunity that's been incredible. And so the growth and the trajectory have been fantastic. I've had a lot of fun along the way.
So that what I was curious about when you said that you interned at Mega Bloks is that you fell in love with toys while you were there. So that
Yeah.
kind of implies that you sort of went along. So if you what do you think you would have been doing if you weren't in toys? Where would you have ended up?
Oh gosh, I do remember, this is a really funny one. When I was studying, I was always talking about furniture, and I still look back and wonder where my passion was, because we had some projects, but I never really invested in that. I think it was just something that I came up to tell people that that was what I was going to do. And mind you, it's like there's finer items in furniture, but I've always been actually exceptionally interested in IKEA, you know, for their traditional stuff. Like everyone's got a bunch of IKEA stuff in their house, but the
Yeah.
way that they build their furniture to look nice, but also just flat pack and be shipped
Yes.
inconvenient. I think, you know, before I got into industrial design, there's something about that that spoke to me. And so just rather than just the idea of like boxes of stuff that you ship out, the idea of how to manufacture and produce that stuff was a beautiful thing. But again, coming back, I never pursued it. I never really pursued it. And so I'm not sure. I mean, sporting goods, sporting equipment, like snowboard gear right now fascinates me. I love to snowboard. And that came later in life. So yeah, I mean, but it's hard. It's really hard. And like I said, I've done other stuff. So I've done, you know, stationery, school stationery. I've done musical instruments, electronic stuff, worked in the medical field, done some casino related products, and all fascinating stuff that I've learned so much about, but none of it comes close to toys for
That's
me.
extraordinary. I love the idea because, funnily, you say about IKEA. I always think that in some respects, I think a lot of designers might look down on IKEA and sneer at it a little bit. It's like the arse end of furniture design. But actually, I'm kind of with you. I think the way it's all packed together and goes together is like a dream. It's fantastically clever.
Yeah.
And I confess, I find it very therapeutic to build. I enjoy building it. I really do.
You and I are part of the chosen few. Like, I don't know if you have any friends. It's actually like, it's funny. There's like this common trend on like Tinder when you're swiping, and it's like people just list, I'm just looking for someone to put my IKEA furniture. You know? But I just think it's true. I've just been there with so many people. I've shown up to people literally just crying on the floor. And this is what they need saving. They just need someone to come in.
I wonder if there's a trait between people that grew up playing with Lego and people that grew up very good at IKEA design. I don't know. Well, speaking of that, that was the first question. Oh, and I should have explained. I knew I'd forget that the auspice under which we have you here, the plot, is that we're going to strand you on an imaginary desert island, Harrie,
right.
And under the circumstances, we're going to allow you to take with you a certain number of toys and games, and maybe a couple of people to make your journey, your time on the island more pleasurable, if not just bearable. So under those circumstances, the first toy or game that we want to discuss with you would be something that you played with in childhood. Is there a toy or a game that you think to yourself, when I look back on my childhood, I was obsessed with this, I thought it was terrific, and stranded on an island, I'd love one?
Right. Absolutely. GI action figures were like a big part of my upbringing, and GI Joes were like definitely the main piece in my collection. And more than GI Joes, I'd actually specify there was like a bootleg copy. I remember at Walmart, GI Corpse, and it was just like a cheap ripoff. I remember walking to the store with the intention of buying a GI Joe, and then you go into the section and there was this big case of like 25 figures for $25 with like tons of accessories. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna need to get a little bang for my buck here, and went for that.
And the bootleggers had you.
Yeah.
You're on board. That's quite. I don't know GI Corpse. We don't really know GI Joe here in the UK. I mean, maybe it's an age thing, but I don't think we had that on TV when I was growing up in the UK. I'm saying that very hesitantly because now that I've said it, it might have been on, and it might have been one of those shows that my parents didn't let me watch. I don't actually know. We'd have to.
It was a very heavy Americana based thing. Like it was very like I think like all all of their iconography had like flags, a lot of stars and stripes, a lot of like red, white, and blue. Like I'm from Canada, but we grabbed so much off of the North American or the American culture. So I get that.
And did the bootleg version have a similar messaging, or was that just a little easier going?
It was a little watered down, like I'll admit, like it's a bit schlocky, like the design and the branding, like they took a lot from G.I. Joe and that Americana. So to whoever doesn't know, G.I. Joe is a very like soldier based action figure with like army soldiers, and they go into offshoots of mech suits or this and that, but it really is about like a soldier. And then you get to the GI Corps and they would have that essence, but then get into kind of weird colors, and the plastic was a little cheap, and the movement was like a little schlocky, and the faces were a little special in ways. Yeah, just mean mugs that maybe weren't intentional, but I think they captured the essence.
I don't know if it'll show on screen, but when you said the faces were a little special, your screen froze by end, and you were pulling a face. I'm hoping that was.
We can do a practice round. I'll give you a few.
Yeah. Keep putting faces throughout. We'll just drop one in. We'll drop one in later. So, Anna, I'm curious that when you look back on those toys as a designer now, is that something that you appreciate now, or do you look back and think, well, actually, this was really simple. It was sophisticated to my brain then, but my brain was only half developed. Where are you on that? Is it great design now, or is it not so great?
Oh, absolutely. It's funny. I'm actually just working on an action figure project right now. And although I've had all these years experience, when you dive into the project, you really start diagnosing it. So I've ordered some of the old GI Joes and some of the new stuff and different stuff that I've played with over the years, and you really get an appreciation for the choices that people make. There's design in the respect of maybe creating something cool and beautiful, and then there's design, which to me is like the most magical part, with constraints. Right. And the ideal is to have every joint imaginable articulated so you can pose and play in whatever way you want. But every joint and articulation point that you create adds cost in there. So you have to be very specific with your intent on where you think the joints need to be made, how they're manufactured, and what your costing is. And so GI Joe to the GI Corps, like I said, there's a major cost difference. One is just margins and distribution that could be managed differently. But a lot of it is cost cutting in places that will save you money, but not be perceived as too damaging to the customer.
Yes.
So even in the cheap stuff, quote unquote, there's magical discoveries that you will find in people not just trying to make, very sophisticated choices, but cost-cutting choices that actually will train the people making the higher quality goods. So it's a beautiful art that I learn from every day.
Yeah, gosh, you've made it sound fantastically valuable to look at rip-offs and bootlegs and cheap stuff, which in my head I've never really, in my head I kind of dismiss a lot of that, thinking, oh, what a shame. But actually, the way you phrase that, maybe I should be paying closer attention to some of that stuff, because there's still lessons to be learned. And actually, the limitations that one is faced with in any design scenario, I find a lot of toy designers, a lot of toy and game inventors are tremendously empowered by those limitations. I find that fascinating. The number of people look at something and say, oh, what a shame. And then they sort of get inspired by the fact, oh, we have to do it. Oh, we can only have 4 sides. Oh, that's a shame. But what if that moment seems quite, I think you used the word magical, and I think that's a good word for it. I think there's a sort of spark that goes because you can't do everything.
Right. I think that's always like something that separated the idea of art and design, because an artist can go and do whatever they want.
Yes.
Even if you give them a project, they can go do whatever they want, spend as much money as they want, work on it forever. But then design has constraints. Design has limitations, whether it's cost, assembly, box size, there's this on the market. You have to find a space that works just for you, that'll set yourself aside. So all of those constraints really create a pathway that you need to follow. And to me, that's really where design comes alive.
Oh, that's fascinating. Yeah, I would like to spend. Maybe we should do an interview for Mojo. I mean, I know we're doing one now, but I mean another one. I'd like to discuss that with you more. I think that would be interesting. There's a point at which art becomes design, and it may be to do with limitations. I shouldn't be thinking about it now. Let me concentrate on what we're doing. I'm a terrible multitasker, absolutely terrible. All right, good. That's a good answer. I enjoyed that. It's good. Let me ask you this then: if you could be joined on this island, let's imagine that you've got somebody else there to play G.I. Joe with, and you're going to be joined by anybody, and it could be living or dead, which is half the fun here. It could be anybody. And when I say, I may have said this recently to somebody, lest I confuse them. If you're going to pick a dead person, the dead person comes back to life for the island. You're not sitting there.
Hopefully.
GI corpse. That would not be.
Nice.
See what I did?
Okay.
I'm having the time of my life. So if you could be joined by any castaway, living or dead, who would you want on the island?
Oh gosh, I'd be quite torn, because the idea of obviously being on a desert island comes with a lot of thoughts and emotions for how long, for the rest of your life. But yeah, I think maybe Chris Rock or the Dalai Lama, for very different reasons. But in truth, and we'll talk to those points, but in truth, maybe also someone I'd prefer to see in a bikini for the rest of my days on an island. But we'll digress from there.
You don't think the Dalai Lama would shape up? I don't know.
There's options. You just don't know how this is going to play out.
He's beach ready all of the time. So the Dalai Lama, Chris Rock, and somebody you'd like to see in the bikini.
Let's throw out the third.
Very shrewd options. Well, let's talk about those. Let's not talk about the bikini.
Chris Rock, he's just like my favorite comedian. I grew up watching him, and I think he's evolved within his comedy, and he's just got like a beautiful way of observing the world in, a very simplified way that I always could understand and just laugh my head off. It's approachable, he's intense, and so that comedy is like followed with me for so long. And I think he's just real in what he says and his approach to things. So I think we could just kind of joke around for the rest of our insane days on this island, and probably just find different elements to observe and joke around at. Mind you, we'd probably both be very snarky with each other, so I could see that going awry, but I suppose that's the example for everybody.
Yeah, well, eventually, I mean, it's the conceit of the desert island doesn't take into account for the fact that after a few days, anybody that you think is supposed to have an island would be a terrible person. You've kind of outstayed your welcome. Go. But the Dalai Lama is an interesting choice. That suggests to me that you've got a very sort of spiritual side to you without necessarily having a religious quality to it.
Yeah, absolutely. I just remember picking up a book a long time ago, The Art of Happiness, and it was co-written by the Dalai Lama and another writer. And yeah, there's just some beautiful insight into there. I don't always subscribe to everything from spiritual leaders in quite the same way, but he does have some beautiful messages, and a lot of it is just about kind of maintaining a certain inner peace that I think doesn't really matter where you are. Mind you, people in the world have very different experiences, and I try to keep myself aware of the good fortune and the luxuries that I've had in my life, that I continue to have. But yeah, there's just some of those teachings that really carry with me, and I can be very hot-headed in certain ways. I'm rambunctious. There's a lot of energy sometimes that comes in, and some of that stuff just helps me take a step back to realize where I'm at and where other people are at. So I think just having someone around that you can kind of bounce off of with ideas and just thoughts and kind of keep yourself in check when you're obviously going to go crazy.
Yeah. That's sort of a very grounding figure to sort of put everything back down to earth a little bit. That's a fascinating choice. And I also like the dichotomy between the Dalai Lama and Chris Rock. I mean, that's a beautiful. I've not really given it any thought, but I just can't see the two of them necessarily getting along.
Right. But you know what's kind of funny? Like, I feel like that's kind of my day to day. That's what's inside of my head. There's a bit of Chris Rock and a bit of Dalai Lama, and they're just battling, and it's this chaos that I just managed to make my day through it.
I love that. I like the idea that that's an extension of your brain.
Yeah.
That's very insightful. We're all going to take away quite a valuable lesson from that.
Yeah.
Brilliant. So now then, in terms of toys you worked on yourself, I think this is a horrible question. I mean, I don't think any of these are necessarily easy questions. But in terms of toys you worked on yourself, a lot of designers, you know, when they've had a new idea and it's the baby of the moment, this is it. That's, you know, they're obsessed with it.
Yeah.
But over the course of time, they say, what was that? I don't even remember that one. You know, a few years later, they forgot they invented the damn thing.
Right.
So I'm always curious, of all the stuff you've ever worked on, and 15 years is a long time to be a designer, what's the one thing that you would think of your own? That's the one I'd take.
Yeah, I would definitely go with Tech Deck Dudes, the relaunch. So I've got one over here, and it was this line of little characters on skateboards. And yeah, I was really excited and proud. So, you know, before Spin Master, you know, I've had a bunch of experience, but I was working on design teams that we worked on a line together with. And then when it got to Spin Master, it was a bit of a shift. They're like, here's an entire line that you're responsible for. And there's a lot of trust and autonomy that came with that. And I mean, Tech Deck Dude, so there was, and sorry, for those that don't know, Tech Deck is that finger skateboard company. And it's been around for 20 years. And then there was Tech Deck Dudes, which are characters on skateboards. So there was a brand of those way back in the day that I loved and played with and thought were very cool. And so now, you know, X years later, I was responsible for redesigning the new set. And so it was an incredible exercise for me in figuring out how to do that on my own. And obviously I had a lot of help from branding, marketing, you know, my team from other perspectives, but on design, it was really onto me. And, you know, we worked in collaboration for approvals with the executive team. But yeah, there's so much to it. There was the characters, there was different crews. So it was building out a world of all these characters. There was creating a connection to the essence of the original Tech Deck Dudes, but figuring out how to bring them into the future a little bit. I brought down the price point. Also, manufacturing has shifted so much. Cost of goods is so different. And so you want to be true to that spirit while being able to make them affordable at this collectible scale. And then one thing that I was just really excited about was just like the roll. This is like the obsession is just like these metal axles. And I obsessively kept coming back. There's so many emails and calls and conversations that I've had with people in North America, in Asia, and our manufacturing partners to just be like, guys, this has to roll beautifully. And it does. And you know, there was an X amount of distance that I required, and people just really went on the journey with me. But at that scale, and they were like $3 retail in North America. So we've got a metal axle, the characters come off, and then you can change them up. So yeah, there was just a lot in there that I'm really proud and excited about. I'll admit that it got one season and then it kind of died out. It just didn't get picked up by the masses. But similar to the action figure stuff that I was talking about, I get really excited about the world building in toys. So when you get characters, you can just kind of play into a world and create a sequence of your imagination, which is incredible.
And that's your favorite part of it. Is it the world building, the character building?
Yeah, I mean, not necessarily just in the design. Like, this is a very beautiful part of it for me, and I do appreciate that. But more specifically, in when I was a kid and playing, I think those characters spoke so much to me. You know, there's tons like a Bop and a Skip It. Those are amazing toys that I played with. But you hop on them and you play with them, and you're doing a thing, and you get cars and you roll them around, and that kind of has a bit of a world. But there's something about action figures and characters that when you get in there, it's like you're really immersed in a video game, in that you imagine the world that comes with them and the scenario that they're fighting or jumping or, you know, teaming up in various capacities.
Yes. It's an interesting point, isn't it? That you've got the type of games and toys where they make you do something, but it's you doing it. Whereas you've got the other type of design, which is the one I think you're talking about, where you end up making the characters do things. You're more getting immersed into that universe. And so that's interesting. I've not seen those, and I'm very curious about the metal axles. Did you have to fight for that? I can imagine that the cost of a plastic axle is much smaller.
Exactly. And it was more, you know, like there's the metal axle, and then it's tiny, but there's actually like two pieces that nest the metal axle in there, and then getting the wheels. It's hard to see, but there's like quite a roll there. So there's a lot of engineering in there actually to get that to work at a cost that was appropriate. And then, you know, there's a lot of like decoration on the figures as well to keep them alive. So it was quite a laborious exercise to balance everything out. And, you know, some have lower deco than others, but amortize the cost in a certain way and figure out the assembly method that got us to a cost that worked for everyone.
Interesting. And in that respect as well, almost certainly just as hard a question, looking at the landscape of other people's toys and games that you haven't had any hand in. I mean, it's such an enormous industry in that respect. What would you zero in on and say this is extraordinary? I would love to have that on a desert island.
Gosh, I mean, the world's changed so much, so I'm going to go back in time still a little bit, but the Tyco RC Rebound I thought was just incredible when it came out. It's a weird time. The RC world has changed dramatically. It's not quite the same as when I was a child. There was like Nico, Tyco, and a few other companies that pumped out all these like cool RCs. And you could still find them on shelf, but they're kind of all owned by, you know, the low margin other companies, because like companies like Spin Master, unless it's licensed, there's just not a lot of money involved in it, and you can't sell one-offs quite the same way as it used to be. It's a bit of a lost art. But yeah, the Rebound was this car that was designed to have two sides. So when it would go, hit something, climb up, it would flip over, and then be another car on the other side.
Yes.
And it was four-wheel drive. It had these giant tires, and it would just go crazy. And the commercial said that it was going to do that, and then when you got it home, it really did. So it was alive, and it was bumping into things, and it was jumping off. But what was so incredible is the way, and magical comes back into play. This is something that really follows in toys day in, day out, is that no matter what happened, it would just hit something, go up, and then just flip over and not skip a beat. You're driving.
Yeah.
You're just back at it.
Which at the time was I mean, literally revolutionary. We've all seen remote control cars that hit the wall and flipped over and sat there with their wheels spinning, and they always felt like, and you know, pick up a bit of carpet fluff and it would suddenly be all over. Yeah. I never cared for any of that, but I agree with you. The Rebound was, I hate the word game changing, I can't stand it, but in that respect, literally game changing. You could play with this in a way that was unlike any other remote control car. It just hit the wall, flipped over, carried on going towards the other wall, and there was more fun crashing it into a wall. Playing with it.
Exactly. You were on a mission for it to flip.
Let's crash the car. No, fantastic choice. That's a great one. I remember those with great affection. They were terrific. Yes, great design. Very good. Must have been mind-blowing at the time. Whoever came up with that idea to just think this was literally changes. It hits the wall and carries on driving. It would be mind-blowing. Very good. It's an exciting choice. I really like that one. So the trouble with these sessions is people talk about it, and then I think I got to go get me one of those. I wonder if I can still get one of those. Of course I can. I can get one of those. Great. So we should wrap it up. We have one more question, and this is something that I always feel I need to over-introduce, because it comes up in conversations at dinner parties and things, tells you a lot about my life. If you wanted to have an epitaph written about you, or you wrote your own epitaph and you're on the desert island, you don't think you're going to get off, but you want to have something of substance, put a message in a bottle, or chip a stone with a message. It doesn't have to be morbid, but what would you like to leave behind? What would that message be?
Oh gosh, I mean, I'll tell you the G-rated one afterwards, but like I think realistically it'll probably be a manifesto of the cult that I've created in my insanity of being on the desert island, not by choice. I just think that would become my calling. It just seems like the obvious way that this would go.
You got Dalai Lama, Chris Rock, and you on a and you're going to start the cult.
Well, someone's got it, you know, like whoever takes the helm. It's the natural course of action. So I don't mind who does the work as long as it gets done. But until I go crazy, if I was to send a message out, it would just be about gratitude. I think I'm very fortunate in my life in so many ways. I've got just a wonderful, supportive family. I've got an incredible set of friends, and I just feel very fortunate in the things that I have and I've created. And work as well. It's not all about work. Life's not all about work, but I know that I've got fortunate. I absolutely love what I do, and I appreciate this interview. I could talk about this stuff for days and like to no end. And there's a passion that continues to grow. I've also had a fortunate set of experiences that I've worked hard for, but that have also just been opportunities laid out in front of me that I've taken. And so I think that's a really exceptional thing. You spend so many hours of your week at work. And so the fact that I get to do that and share that with my friends and family and have the life that I have, I just want to make sure that everyone is aware of how I feel about that, and that they've been a part of it.
Oh, wow. Well, that's terrific. There we go. An attitude. I was going to say an attitude of gratitude. That's exactly what it is. That is. Oh, listen to that. That's gone off. That's a terrific thing, and you don't get a lot of it. You don't get a lot of people sort of leaving a message about themselves, which is not about themselves. It's about other people. Perfect. Do you know what? I can't think of a better note to end on. I think that's absolutely terrific. I'm going to wrap it up there. Harrie, what a pleasure. Thank you so much for your time. I hope we can do it again. Thank you.
Oh gosh, Deej, it's been so great. Thank you so much for having me.
All right, my friend. Good to see you.
Have a great day.